Congress was to introduce the bill and champion legislation to do away with QUIP. Now, who knows what QUIP is?
Construction work in progress.
Construction work in progress. And I just want the people of New Hampshire to know that's what Hugh Gallen fought so hard for when he was governor of this state, our beloved Hugh Gallen. And I was the one that took the lead in that. And unless we get rid of that QUIP, they're going to keep right on building nuclear power plants.
Yeah, let me say on nuclear, too. I mean, Paul, we're not all trying to gang up on you. We're not saying you're wrong all of the time. But on this particular issue, I mean, I think you are. I mean, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has lied to the American people. The Department of Energy, when I was governor of the state of Nebraska, lied to me. They said when they were shipping high-level waste across the state that they were going to notify us. They didn't notify us. We had to fly a bunch of helicopters down and block them so they couldn't come across the state. When your own government lies, it causes the people to break trust and lose trust. And nuclear power, it seems to me, is fatally flawed because we have no capacity to get rid of the high-level waste. We're struggling, in fact, to get rid of the low-level waste. And we have tremendous and exciting opportunities in the area of energy efficiency to produce more energy through efficiency and cheaper energy through efficiency than we ever can through what I consider essentially to be socialized energy, and that's nuclear.
In fairness to you, Senator Tsongas, did you fully address to your satisfaction the charge that Governor Brown was making about someone being in your office?
I'm not sure whether... I mean, I believe you that it happened, okay?
Okay.
I didn't say to him personally,
Right.
brought representations to your office. He's a whistleblower. The NRC's after him, and Paul said that he would be a friend of the whistleblowers. So I just wanted to invite him to be a friend of one in his own neighborhood.
I will do that, but let me make it very clear. My argument goes back a long time. Fact is, there's a finite amount of fossil fuels on this earth. If we take the position that we are sure that we can do away with this energy source of nuclear power, we are going to end up with more fossil fuels. We just went through this rhythm of saying we're all aggressively pursuing the president on global warming. If you take out all your nuclear power plants, by definition, you're going to have more fossil fuel burning and add to the greenhouse effect. I take the position that the threat long-term is global warming, and that threat is real. And that's where I'm coming from.
Well, I don't think you need nuclear to get rid of global warming, for gosh sakes. I mean,
no, but
what Jerry Brown is talking, what Jerry Brown is talking about earlier is absolutely right. I don't know, $300 billion, but we could save $160 billion over the next 8 years just by tightening up corporate average fuel economies. Gosh, 12 miles per gallon. We're at 20 right now, and Ronald Reagan did a total dive on corporate average fuel economy. Another 12 miles per the gallon produces energy efficiency enough to require us not to import anything from the Persian Gulf. I mean, we've got a lot of energy that we can generate just through the avenue of savings. So I disagree with you, Paul, when you say that the choice is either nuclear or oil.
That's not what I said. The position is on building more nuclear power plants.
The more plants you have and the longer they run, the more probability that there's going to be a radioactive release that affects people.
I'd like to know what Governor Clinton's position is on building more nuclear power plants. We haven't heard that one yet.
My belief is that we have enormous electricity capacity now. I do not favor anything that will accelerate the building of nuclear power plants. I'm against this one-stop permitting bill that's in the United States Congress. I don't know how everybody else feels about it. I think if you have least cost planning, if you have major incentives to the utilities to engage in conservation, if you have a major attempt to convert to natural gas wherever you can, and I realize that's in my part of the country, but now you can get natural gas in New England because of the pipelines, I don't think you're going to see a need for new nuclear power plants. And I certainly don't believe we should continue to do what happened in the Reagan-Bush years, where they pushed nuclear plants at sometimes 5 and 6 times cost overruns, and they shoved them down the throat of states like mine, which never even approved them.
Well, please, gentlemen, don't expend all your energies on energy, because we have more questions. 3 days from now, all of you will pack up and leave the great state of New Hampshire. What single economic promise you have made will find a job, buy a meal, or pay for a prescription medicine?
Bernie, I'll take that one right off the bat. I'm the one that's got an economic program, a specific 5-point economic program. I call it my blueprint for the future, to rebuild America. There are cities and towns all over New Hampshire, and indeed all over America. The Conference of Mayors pointed out over 4,000 ready to go, where they have plans on the shelves for city improvements. It could be streets, sewer and water, bridge replacement, school improvement programs. I just had dozens of local councilmen and mayors signed on to my campaign. They stood in back of me and announced their support for me, and they all held up blueprints of the plans that they have on the shelves right now in places like Franklin and Derry and Portsmouth and and Nashua, up in Berlin, all over this state. My program calls for putting $35 billion over and above what we're doing right now, right down to these local communities next year. They'll be able to let those contracts out to the private sector, put people to work immediately all over this state and all over America. And guess what happens when those people go to work? They get well paid. They go downtown. They shop on Main Street. They buy clothes for the kids. They buy a carpet for the floor. They buy furniture for their house. They may even buy a new car, American, I hope, and gets the economy going again. That's the specific promise I've made, is to take that peace dividend next year, get that $35 billion down to these local communities. The first words out of my mouth next year, Bernie, after I take that oath of office, is going to be, America, start your engines. Time to go to work.
Well, these other four are going to have something to say about that, Senator. Let's see what they think.
Right.
Well, I don't know where he's going to get $35 billion, but we can come back to that later. I mean, the things that I would do immediately are to say to the banking regulators, you've got to start making loans. I'd get capital in the banking system, and I'd back it up by bringing Small Business Administration credits to small businesses so we can start creating jobs at the community level up. And secondly, I do believe that a targeted investment tax credit, particularly targeted for the manufacturing base, followed on by making sure that that money is going into manufacturing base here in the state of New Hampshire, as well as other states, would produce tremendous increase in employment. I bet I haven't visited a single factory in this country yet in New Hampshire that doesn't have some urgent need to modernize. And if our workers are out there operating 20, 30, 40-year-old gear against other countries that are using 2, 3, 4-year-old gear, we're going to have a tough time competing, and our standard of living is going to go down. But let me also say, in defense of Tom and everybody else on this platform, that no one in America, no political figure in America, is more indifferent when it comes to jobs than George Bush. He is massively indifferent. He does not know what a job means to most Americans. I said the other day, I heard that he, like Paul Tsongas' call to economic arms so much that he was going to put his own one out called Farewell to Economic Arms, because that's exactly what's going on in this country. I mean, he is marking time. This recession started over a year ago, and now that it's a political issue, the president responds, and it's too late for an awful lot of people that have lost their jobs, lost their homes, and lost their confidence as a consequence.
Governor, Senator?
If I were president tomorrow, I would accelerate the highway funding of the next 5 years and compress it into 2 or 3 years. I would change the bank policies very specifically, and I would tell the federal regulators that have taken over New Hampshire banks that are now calling loans on businesses that have never missed a payment to stop it. I would establish, as a part of the Federal Bank Reform Act, a whole network of small business development banks throughout the country to make community-based small business loans again. This state can turn around in a hurry because they got well-skilled, well-educated people, if you had that. And I would have some changes in the tax law which would give people incentives to invest in plant and equipment here. Not only an investment tax credit and some modification of the real estate laws, but I would remove the incentives that now exist in the tax code to shut your plant down here and move it overseas, and instead give incentives to invest in our economy.
Senator?
I think, excuse me, Bob Kerrey is right. George Bush, and Dan Quayle too, by the way, they have steel cable safety nets. So no matter what happens to this economy, they will not be hurt. We've seen that in New Hampshire. As president, you have to do first, day one, declare an economic emergency. Give the American people a sense of the peril that they face, and then begin to move in the direction of articulating an understandable economic battle plan. If you go into any community in New Hampshire, and you ask any person you meet on the street, what is the economic battle plan of George Bush to make the United States competitive? Nobody can answer that because there is no such plan. This, thank you for the reference, Bob. This is mine. And I would urge anyone who would like a copy to get in touch with us. It's very simple. Where is the engine? The engine is manufacturing. What are the needs? Venture capital, equity capital, credit. That's how you grow the companies so they can expand, employ people, so people can have jobs and provide for their families.
Governor?
And just in reference to the call to arms, I believe each of the 3 major tax breaks put in there have already been tried and then removed, and now they're bringing them back again. So I make the proposal, let's get to a simple, fair, flat tax that will allow business to know what their burden is and plan out a long term. Also, it removes from those making middle and lower income a tremendous amount of the tax they're now paying. But let me say, if I am President of the United States, having been elected on a reform campaign of taking no more than $100, fighting the congressional pay raise, fighting for term limits at the Democratic Convention, we will already see a second American Revolution, and we'll be in position to do what all these people are talking about, and they sound so great. Why haven't they happened? And they haven't happened because there's something unreal about all this. The thing in Washington, the government, the way it works, is stuck. And when I say that we could save $300 billion every year in this country just by energy savings, and that we could put millions of unemployed people to work achieving that goal over the next 15 years, you have to say, why doesn't it happen? And it doesn't happen for one reason. The system is stuck. And only if New Hampshire sends a very powerful message that they want that system changed will we have any hope of really dealing with many of the good ideas that we're hearing.
Let me just say one thing. It doesn't happen because of the president. It doesn't happen because we got a president who doesn't believe we need a national economic plan. That's why it doesn't happen. That's why you've had middle-class people working harder for less money. A national network reported tonight that the average middle-class family was working 1 month longer a year in 1989 than 20 years ago. We need a national plan, and then we need a commitment to taking care of one another again. I don't think you can just make this economic. There's far more than economics here. And we are trying to instill a sense of common purpose in this country again. That is something that this guy doesn't believe in. They have cynically manipulated the people in New Hampshire, and I don't know, we all agree with that, but I think it's very important to put that on the table. You got to have more than economics. You got to go beyond manipulation and level with people and pull them together.
Well, first of all, Bernie, again, getting back to this issue of putting people to work, there's a lot of pain out there right now. I mean, people are out of work. They're losing their homes. Here in New Hampshire, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to. Talked to Marie and Bob Mulligan. He lost his job in September. They're going to foreclose on his home and throw him out. I say that's wrong. We need a national moratorium, and I've called for that, on foreclosures of homes of people who've lost their jobs. Let's stretch them out. Let's keep them in their homes. Secondly, we got to put people to work right away. Now, again, Paul says that the engine that moves our economy is manufacturing. I'm sorry. The engine that moves our economy is people, our human resources. Well-educated, healthy, well-motivated, from strong families, in strong communities, with good job opportunities. That's what drives our economy, our human resources. And lastly, I have to say this. This is sponsored by the League of Women Voters. We haven't even touched on the role of women in our society and in our workforce. And that is one of my 5-point economic programs in my plan to rebuild America, is let's focus on the family.
Okay, you're not going to go over the 5 points now, are you?
No.
Right.
I'm going to go over the one that deals with women.
All right.
Because half of our workforce are women, and they're still getting 69 cents on the dollar that a man's getting. And I say that's wrong. 72 years after women got the right to vote, it's time for pay equity. It's time for equal rights. It's time to have family leave programs, child care programs, to make sure that the women who are forced to go into the workplace today are able to still take care of their families.
Bernie, let me insert one thing in here. I mean, as a Democrat who's done deficit reduction, I was governor of Nebraska, entered with a deficit and left with a surplus. And you know, one of the things that I'm arguing, and I'm going to make it clear to the people in New Hampshire, that if you want to get rid of this deficit, and we've got to, it's a moral obligation. I mean, I made a lot of money in my lifetime because my parents worked hard to build a paradise, but it wasn't for them, it was for me. They sacrificed for me. They put themselves on the line for me. And right now, we're doing just the opposite with this deficit financing. $4 trillion worth of debt and a $400 billion deficit this year. I mean, we've got to take concerted action. And the only way that you're going to be able to do that, Bernie, with great respect for a lot of my friends out there who are concerned about what I might do by taking the size of the federal government down, the only way you're going to do it is by demonstrating the capacity to say no to friends. It's a lot of fun to say no to enemies. I mean, I kind of enjoy that. But saying no to friends is precisely what we're going to have to do. And make no mistake about it. Reducing the size of our deficit will increase economic opportunity for every child out there right now who's in 4th grade, who is going to be graduating into the year 2000 and is going to have significantly higher debt as a consequence.
The time crunch is breathing on us, but quickly to you, Governor Clinton, before...
No, maybe we could just all talk about what we do specifically rather than rhetorically to reduce the debt. Because I think Bob's right about that. I mean, this whole generation, I mean, Ronald Reagan and George Bush basically gave us the politics of nostalgia, and we had a heck of a good time at our children and our grandchildren's expense. Now we've got to do two things that seem contradictory. Increase investment in the public sector and reduce the debt at the same time. You got to stop the bank failures. That's about 25 to 30% of it. You have to reduce dramatically the recession through the kinds of investments we're talking about. That's $150 billion. And I think if you bring health care costs into line with inflation and you reorganize these federal departments through a quality management system, I mean, dramatically restructure them, you can save another $100 billion over the next 4 years and spend less than you save. That plus defense reductions will enable us to both increase investment and reduce the deficit, and we owe that to our kids. Both things.
Last question, brief answers, please. In this presidential election, for the first time, more than half of nationwide voting could be done in the suburbs. But the cities are still there, many dying, some dead. What would you do to save urban America?
Well, Bernard, I live in a city not far from here, Lowell, Massachusetts, not unlike Nashua and not unlike Manchester. A city that was a great city, had its textile base, its manufacturing base disappear. My father was a small businessman, and we lived through that. It was not very pretty. We came back because we had high technology, a new manufacturing base. That's why I care so much about it, because this, for me, is not theory. This is not some staff memo. I lived this as a child. What I have to do, what we all have to do, is get this economy moving so you can have that kind of expansion so people in the cities have jobs. And it is the private sector investing in the cities which is the way you bring those cities back.
One way you can make the cities with the greatest unemployment come back is make an enterprise zone and for 10 years free the company of any taxes if it invests in that area and hires the people in that particular place. And if we do that and turn the welfare check into a welfare voucher that can be exchanged with a private employer, you'll see people going to work who are now not doing anything.
Bernie, last summer I gave a speech in New York City about my plans for New York City. The same day, on the front page of the New York Times was Governor Cuomo's plan to rebuild New York City. Governor Cuomo's plan to help New York City is the same as my plan. What Mayor Ray Flynn of Boston is talking about to rebuild the cities is my plan. Cut defense spending by 50% over 10 years. That's going to free up $420 billion. I'm going to take $280 billion of that and put it into a fund to rebuild America, and it's going to go right directly into our cities.
Did you have to mention Governor Cuomo's name? Now more people will write his name in.
He's right, Bob.
If you do national health insurance, I hate to sound like a Johnny One Note, but the fact is national health insurance will bring $10 billion into the inner city because of underfunding right now with children. You provide continuous health care for all our children, eliminate the barrier of losing your health care if you move off of welfare. You can do the kind of welfare reform that Governor Clinton has been talking about, and nothing will help the inner city more.
We have to give the private sector incentives. We have to have a new community-based housing program. You have to do something about health services in the schools, and you've got to have an anti-crime program. More police on the street and community policing, more community-based boot camps to keep these kids from going to prison and to put them in contact with training and education and treatment again.
That concludes the second part of this debate. The third and final segment of tonight's agenda, closing statements by these candidates. Each candidate has been allotted 1 minute. The order of their speaking was determined by lot. We hear first from former California Governor Jerry Brown.
We have the resources in this country. We're a very rich nation. We don't have the commitment to every American family to make sure they have a living family wage. That has to be our #1 job. This political system is stuck. It's stagnant. It's not working. If you have been touched by this message of grassroots organization, of living or dying on the shoulders of average voters, I want you to support this campaign. If you want to vote for a politics that has brought us where we are, there are other candidates that can provide that. New Hampshire, you are the messenger, and you can send a message to Washington that will wake them up and change the whole dynamic of this country. I love America, and I want to see that we really realize our potential. I want you to join this cause. You can, and you can do it by calling our number, 1-800-426-1112. That's the way, without knowing any politician, you can be a part of this cause. May God bless our undertakings.
Next, the governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton.
I'd like to thank this network and the League of Women Voters for providing this opportunity for us to talk to the American people. I'd like to say a special word of thanks to the people of New Hampshire for taking my wife and me and our campaign into your homes and your hearts, for sharing your pain, your frustration, your anger, your courage, your determination, and your hope. I've tried to offer specifics and solutions and a dramatically different approach to government. I believe this is a big, big election which will determine the life of America well into the 21st century. I believe we need a new, dramatically different economic course. I believe we need to come together in a new covenant to reestablish the bonds of community and decency and humanity, taking responsibility for each other. Any plan is a piece of paper. I've got more than a plan. 10 years and more of committed leadership, every day trying to make today better than yesterday and tomorrow better than today. Embrace this challenge with me, and we can change America and win again.
Next, former U.S. Senator Paul Tsongas of Massachusetts.
Thank you very much. Next Tuesday, America will be at a crossroads here in New Hampshire. There are two roads. One is easy, one is comfortable, but it's downhill. The other is the road to economic prosperity for a great America, a healthy America, a vibrant America. That road is steeper and it's harder, but it's more noble and it's more worthy. I believe on Tuesday you will choose that road. I think what you're saying to us is we are ready. Tell us the truth. Give us the economic truth. We can deal with it. We can prevail. We are a great nation. Treat us that way. George Bush has not. Tonight I wish to take you in that direction as your president. It's going to be harder. It's going to test us. But at the end of it, when we climb up that hill, we will be on the mountaintop. And we can turn to our children and say to them, we have done right. This is a viable nation. We give it to you. We have lived up to our generational responsibility. That is the road that I wish to take. I ask you to come with me.
Next, a closing statement from Senator Bob Kerrey of Nebraska.
Thank you, Bernie. 30 years ago, when I graduated from high school, I had a tremendous economic opportunity, a lot of prosperity laying in front of me. And I had that opportunity because, fortunately for myself and my 7 brothers and sisters, we had 2 rather remarkable parents that worked their entire adult lives building a dream and building a paradise for 7 sometimes ungrateful children. We have seen the dream of America wiped out by unchecked selfishness and greed of the 1980s, led by Ronald Reagan and George Bush, who have told us that all we have to do is look out for number 1 and everything will be okay. Well, I don't believe that. I believe unless we reinstitute the value of caring for others and caring particularly for our children, we'll not take the pathway to economic greatness. I will fight to put the people of New Hampshire and America back to work for national health insurance, to make our cities safe again, and most of all, I'm going to say to you that now is our time. Let's seize the moment, and let's work to make America great again.
And finally, let's go to the Hawkeye State. We hear from Senator Tom Harkin.
Thank you, Bernie.
Of Iowa.
Thank you, Bernie. Tonight, I believe you good citizens of New Hampshire are asking for something back. Our government. A government that cares about you, that cares about your dreams, and cares about the kind of world that your children will inherit. Our campaign has drawn inspiration from the Presidents Roosevelt and Presidents Truman and President Kennedy because their vision was a bold vision for the future, and so is ours. We mean to throw out Reagan-Bush economics completely, and we mean to return our government to our families and our communities, and to return something to government that's been missing for far too long: care and compassion in the White House. I do not believe that has gone out of style. If we do this, the future's ours. But if we lower our sights, and if we compromise with the forces of greed that dominate government in our society, then soon we'll lower our heads, we'll lower our hopes, then our children's hopes, and then freedom's hopes. We can never give up, not tonight, not ever. And I know you agree with me. And that's why I ask for your support on Tuesday. Together we can win the nomination. Together we can win the White House. Together we can build a new America. Thank you, God bless you, and good night.
And gentlemen, a return thanks to each of you. And that's it for this debate. Our thanks to these 5 major Democratic candidates who joined us here this evening. Thanks also to St. Anselm College for hosting tonight's event. Special thanks to the staff of Debates 92 for their assistance. For the co-sponsors of this debate, Cable News Network and the League of Women Voters Education Fund, I'm Bernard Shaw.
And I'm Catherine Cryer. With me again are Newsweek political correspondent Eleanor Clift and of the Baltimore Sun syndicated columnist Jack Germond. Well, both of you, we have just heard 90 minutes of debate, so what are tomorrow's headlines, Jack?
The headline is no hits, no runs, no errors.
We've heard this before. We heard it again.
No, I think it was a good debate, but I don't think anybody made any big points.
All right, Eleanor, what do you think?
Well, the headline is probably the clash over nuclear power, which is the only time there was any energy in this debate. But I think the Democrats really missed the boat. They're accusing the president of not having a good economic plan, and none of them really came up with something that would compel the country to vote for them, I don't think.
All right, well, we're going to take a break for our local cable companies, but when we return, we'll have more with Eleanor Clift, Jack Germond, plus a little post-debate assessment with Bernie Shaw, Ken Bodie, our public opinion specialist, William Schneider, and CNN special assignment correspondent, Brooks Jackson. Stay with us. Presidential debate concluded just moments ago, and here with me, Baltimore Sun syndicated columnist Jack Germond, and of Newsweek, Eleanor Clift. Now, let's assess a little bit what we saw and heard. Did we hear anything new, Jack?
No, but you almost never do in these debates. They give you essentially what they're saying in their campaign speeches all the time, in a somewhat distilled form, and they try to emphasize the points that they think are important in getting a particular part of the electorate. For example, Tom Harkin was talking about the nuclear power because he sees an opening to the people who people who oppose to the Seabrook plant here in New Hampshire. Actually, it's a pretty arcane issue for this whole electorate, and I think it was sort of off the subject. But that's why they do this, and they're all talking about the things they always talk about.
Eleanor, then anything you think those New Hampshire voters were listening to when they cast their votes on Tuesday?
Well, we heard a couple of mentions of Pease Air Force Base, and I guess some suggestions of how they would revive the state's economy. But it just seems to me that they really missed the opportunity in confronting the pain that is in this state. I mean, you would never know that the people in this state feel like they're on the verge of apocalypse now. I mean, they do have economic ideas, but none of them are easily communicable to people. And they just, you know, it's 5-point proposals and 3 points here, and it just seems to me there's no 1 or 2 compelling ideas that you come away with.
Well, let me quarrel with Eleanor a little bit about that. I think that's true, and even a 90-minute debate is difficult. But they, at least 4 of them, maybe all 5 of them, have a lot more detailed knowledge, a lot more prescriptive knowledge about the economy that they demonstrate than the president did when he's been up here. He's come up here and said, "Message, I care." So I don't think that the fact that they don't spell out a whole program, domestic or economic program in this format, is surprising.
Let me ask each of you, though, quickly, did we hear anything to quash rumors of another candidate getting into the race?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there's still going to be dissatisfaction with this field. And the little quip that Bob Kerrey made about mentioning Mario Cuomo's name, I mean, he is, again, the shadow candidate, and everybody's going to be watching to see how well that write-in does.
Yeah, no, I think the fact is, at least 2 or 3 of these people are certainly presidential caliber, but they may not be electable. They may not be perceived as electable. We're going to have another candidate, maybe.
So back to our winners and losers. Who won, who lost?
Well, I think Tsongas won simply because nothing happened to change anything.
Well, I think some did better than others. I think Senator Tsongas underscored his thoughtfulness. I mean, he was a winner tonight. And I think Bob Kerrey showed toughness and intensity, which he needed to do. I think Bill Clinton was very subdued. And he's too much of a team player for this format. I think he should have elbowed his way in a little bit more.
All right, but when we come back, we're going to have CNN's Bernard Shaw and a conversation with Democratic National Party Chairman Ron Brown. Stay with us.
Bernard Shaw now back with the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Ron Brown, I don't see any blood on this carpet. Why not?
Well, I'm glad there's not. I think the Democratic Party won tonight. I think the American people won tonight. If George Bush had been in this debate, he'd have finished 6th. because he has no sensitivity to the needs of everyday working men and women and working families. He saw serious candidates with a real plan. I don't remember a time in my lifetime where candidates have come forward this early in the political process for the presidential election with specific plans for what they do to get our economy back on track. I couldn't be more pleased with the outcome of the debate and with the performance of our candidates.
Well, are you surprised by this collegiality that existed on this stage? After all, each man wants to get your party's nomination.
Sure.
Did this surprise you?
Pleasantly surprised, I might say.
Were you worried as it
Well, obviously,
started?
you're always concerned. You don't want divisiveness within the party. You don't want candidates attacking each other. We didn't have any of that tonight. We had people with a vision for the future of America, with specific plans of how to get there. The focus was really on the difference between Democrats and George Bush and their massive differences. George Bush has no economic recovery plan for America. He really has no domestic agenda. He said we were going to get it in the State of the Union address. His presidency has been a failed presidency. It's been a presidency of denial and blame.
Okay, now, while George Bush recovers from those body blows you just subjected him to, let's pick apart this field. In your heart, you know who was strongest tonight. In your heart, you know who was weakest. Are you going to share it with us?
Well, I really don't. I think they all performed well. I think they all took their case to the American people. I think there's a lot of commonality in their vision for the future. There are some differences. It's up to first the voters of New Hampshire on Tuesday to make those kinds of judgments. But frankly, I don't think there was a winner and a loser. As I indicated, I think the party won because it shows we're a party that really thinks about and has a plan for getting America back on track again.
What about factors beyond this hall, Ron Brown, tonight? Wendell Ford heading up a group to search for a candidate. Talk among voters and among state party chairs that somebody else ought to get it at this point because these guys, in the views of many critics, these guys who are on this stage can't hack it.
Well, Bernie, you were with them tonight. I don't think you believe that. I think we've got a terrific field of candidates, all issue-oriented, anti-status quo, committed to change, committed into the economic recovery of America. I think anybody that saw them had to be impressed that they're thoughtful and bright and aggressive.
What would you do if people insist on saying we want to put somebody else in there?
Well, you can't make somebody run for president, Bernie. Running for president is more than just a notion. You've got to want to do it. You've got to take your case to the people. I'm pleased with the present field. Obviously, anybody can get in the race whenever they want. Frankly, the longer folks who are thinking about it wait, the less likely it is that they would be able to put together the delegate strength to gain the nomination. There is some talk that maybe if no one has a majority going into the convention, then the convention actually decides on who our nominee is, and that might well be the case, but I don't think that. I think the voters will make the judgment during the primaries and caucuses. I think one of these people that you saw here tonight is going to be the next president of the United States.
Okay, let us in on this. You're doing tracking polls. A lot of people say this thing is very, very close. What do your latest polls tell you about these 5 men on this stage tonight?
That it is very close. There's still a lot of undecided voters here in New Hampshire. It's been changing almost night to night. I think a lot of people will be making up their minds between now and when the first votes are cast on Tuesday. So I really think it's up for grabs. As you all know, and as the people who have been watching these polls know, the recent polls have shown Paul Tsongas in the lead. I think he performed well tonight, but I think all the other candidates performed well as well. And now it's up to the people of New Hampshire to make their judgment.
How do you feel viscerally in your gut when you hear people whispering that Paul Tsongas, because of his recovery with cancer, is not electable?
Oh, I don't believe that. I think
You've heard that talk.
I've heard it. All of these 5 candidates are electable. 4 years ago in this state, we were hearing that George Bush wasn't electable. Bob Dole was going to wipe him out and was going to be the Republican nominee, and lo and behold, he survived the primaries and went on to win a general election campaign. But George Bush is going to be a one-term president. He deserves to be a one-term president because he's failed the American people.
Ron Brown, Chairman of the Democratic National Committee, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Bernie.
Let's go back to Catherine Cryer.
Thanks, Bernie. And when we come back, CNN's one-man Truth Squad special assignment correspondent Brooks Jackson and Bernard Shaw will be back with another guest for a little more post-debate analysis. Presidential candidates had a lot to say during tonight's debate, but how did their rhetoric stack up to reality? CNN special assignment correspondent Brooks Jackson takes a look. Brooks?
Well, Catherine, with one more day of campaigning before the voters cast their ballots on Tuesday, the candidates were very cautious. We were sitting here with a team of researchers poised to jump on any misstatements of fact. And the short course is here that we found no obvious clinkers in this debate. Now, this is not to endorse everything that was said. There are a few facts and figures touted about that we're not quite sure where they came from, and we will be checking into those later. But no big stumbles here tonight. Catherine?
All right, thanks, Brooks, and let's go back down to the stage and Bernie Shaw. Bernie?
Thank you, Catherine. Ken Bodie, as I observed to Ron Brown, there is not one speck of blood on this carpet tonight, and that's surprising.
Well, not so much because it's right before the New Hampshire primary. Any major outburst tonight, any major piece of news that was made tonight really has the potential of shifting this state. This is a state of people that's paying very, very close attention to this primary right now. And this debate was at a very propitious moment for that. The fact that it was on the economy and the state's economy is in such bad shape at the present time was probably not only good for the people of New Hampshire, but good for the people of the country to take a look at what these fellows' plans are for America.
I had the impression that, well, he said as much before we went on the air. More explicitly, Ron Brown was hoping that there would not be the jarring confrontations that have occurred somewhat in past debates and along the campaign trail. And as a party chairman, he got his wish.
Well, in that respect, nobody was going to take any chances tonight, I don't think. I think the strategy was conservative on everybody's part to be sure that there were any confrontations, they were not acrimonious, that nobody was going to embarrass himself by creating a soundbite tomorrow that could really have the effect of evaporating voter support.
Who was it that set up here? I think it was Kerry who said we might not be making news tonight, but my impression was that they made clarity.
I think you're right, and I think they also ultimately got to you at one point in the debate when they took it over themselves. They started talking about nuclear power. Nuclear energy has been, and particularly Seabrook, has been a very important issue in this state historically. It's one that hasn't received a lot of treatment in this campaign, but it got a pretty fair airing tonight. And I think they probably spent more time on it than Senator Tsongas would have liked tonight.
Well, speaking of Tsongas, clearly the other four know who's leading in most of the polls, because repeatedly there was almost an air of deferentialness here on this stage tonight, which I found striking to see up close.
Which, if you would have had this debate maybe 10 days ago, and Tsongas was as clear a front-runner as he was in the polls tonight, you might have seen a little bit more of an attack kind of mentality on the part of the candidates. Tsongas is a very soft-spoken, very gentle candidate who almost never speaks ill of any other candidate, and they responded by not speaking ill of the front-runner, and that's unusual.
But this is politics. This is Sunday night. You think we're going to see those attack ads that each candidate has stashed away?
Well, it's very interesting. I don't think you're going to see them this weekend. I think that's over with now. I'd be very surprised. On the Republican side, we're seeing a fair amount of negative campaigning going on right now, and some more blunt talk even than we're getting on the Democratic side. I would doubt that we'd see any more negative ads than we've seen already at this time.
One impression I had tonight, and it's hard to say when you're on this stage looking at them, but we've covered debates and campaigns for many years. I had the impression that each of these Democrats tonight was reaching out to those white Democrats who voted for Ronald Reagan, who voted for George Bush tonight. I had the impression they were making a collective effort to reach out and bring back home, as McGovern used to say, come home, America, bring back home some voters, white-collar workers, blue-collar workers who fled the Democratic Party for the GOP over the past 10 years, 12 years.
Well, if they did that, Bernie, they didn't do it by having any comforting words to say about the priorities of the Reagan administration or the Bush administration at any point. I thought George Bush took a fairly good beating up here tonight.
I thought so, too.
On the whole. It was interesting, the question you asked them with the $10 billion, what are you going to do with it? Put it with American work training here, or you give it to Boris Yeltsin? In this state, with the economy in the shape it's in right now, there really was only one answer to that question for these fellows up here tonight, and only Jerry Brown made a gesture in any other direction except to say jobs, jobs, jobs.
Jerry Brown, is he really the wild card in this campaign that a lot of critics are making him out to be?
I don't know that he's a wild card so much in that sense. What Jerry Brown
He's making a lot of sense in some of his positions here.
That's right. If you talk to people who listen to Jerry Brown, they say, this guy makes a lot of sense, and they criticize him for being the wrong messenger. One of the things I think you can say about Jerry Brown is that some of the others on this stage tonight might get out of this race if they don't do well in the first rounds of primaries, maybe even this primary or the ones right afterwards. Jerry Brown has very little incentive to get out of the race because it's costing him so little, and just by dint of staying around and letting his ideas soak in, that's his greatest hope for success. So even if the field narrows, I don't think we can expect Jerry Brown to be one of the ones who gets out very soon.
Very telling, this effort tonight not to make a mistake, given what Bill Clinton has said about the charges of infidelity, and given of late what he said about the draft letter, in all that's happened up until this debate tonight, and then we get on this stage with these five guys and not a peep out of them.
Well, that's exactly right, and that tells you how risk-free they wanted to be in terms of anything that was really incendiary out of this debate. Bill Clinton got off completely on any of the issues that have surrounded his candidacy and clouded his candidacy over the last few weeks up here. Paul Tsongas was treated quite gently on the matter of nuclear energy, but a day or so ago, Tom Harkin went out and stood in front of Seabrook and really raised the nuclear issue pretty strongly. Some of the ads are pretty blunt that we've heard up here up to now, but tonight up here, it was really Alphonse Gaston.
One last quick point, Kim, before we pause for a commercial break. In a way, and my vision could be clouded because I was standing opposite him, I got the impression that Bob Kerrey was coming into his own tonight in this debate.
Well, they've said that Bob Kerrey has had trouble connecting, and you've seen it sometimes that he does have trouble connecting. Kerry did look very good tonight. He did make his points. He made them directly. He made them succinctly, and I agree with you. I think that Kerry looked awfully good tonight.
Thank you, Ken Bodie, and I will be right back with some final thoughts in a moment. Voters could look them dead in the eyes, even smell their breath. Voters today can hardly pierce the veil of ads, consultants, and image makers. A television camera has come between voter and candidate. New Hampshireites, because their state is small, can still get a nostalgic whiff of up-close American politics, and they exercise their opportunities with a vengeance. Still, nowadays, the only way to get 5 candidates in your living room is in a televised debate. The camera shows a lot. It does not lie in its almost microscopic penetration. For in a televised debate, the candidate can run, but the candidate cannot hide. This kind of tough scrutiny is the voter's ultimate assistance at decision time, and the candidates know it. That's why they participate. It is their collective chance to show what they are made of, what they stand for, and how they stack up against one another. Kerry, Brown, Tsongas, Clinton, Harkin are having their final say. On Tuesday, New Hampshireites will have theirs. I'm Bernard Shaw in Manchester. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't leave, though.
Started over a year ago. I said the other day, I heard that he liked Paul Tsongas.
I believe this is a big, big election.
They get well paid. They go downtown. They shop on Main Street.
This is either nuclear or oil.
I'd like to know what Clinton's position is on building more nuclear power plants. Kerry?
The longer they run, the more probability that there's going to be a radioactive release that affects.
I'd like to know what Senator Clinton's position is on building more nuclear power plants. We haven't heard that one.
That we're not even using because we're wasting it. We're pouring it through a totally inefficient system because of the advocacy of the energy utilities, the nuclear industry, the whole, I believe, Congress in a stranglehold.
I might add, let's
Tsongas also faced criticism over his economic proposals, which some of his opponents have characterized as warmed-over republicanism.
Paul says that the engine that moves our economy is manufacturing. I'm sorry. The engine that moves our economy is people, our human resources. Well-educated, healthy, well-motivated, from strong families, in strong communities, with good job opportunities. That's what drives our economy, our human resources.
But the candidates seem to agree more than they disagreed, and they saved their sharpest attacks for the incumbent, George Bush.
No political figure in America is more indifferent when it comes to jobs than George Bush. He is massively indifferent. He does not know what a job means to most Americans. I said the other day, I heard that he liked Paul Tsongas' call to economic arms so much that he was going to put his own one out called Farewell to Economic Arms, because that's exactly what's going on in this country. I mean, he is marking time. This recession started over a year ago, and now that it's a political issue, the president responds.
It doesn't happen because of the president. It doesn't happen because we got a president who doesn't believe we need a national economic plan. That's why it doesn't happen. That's why you've had middle-class people working harder for less money. A national network reported tonight that the average middle-class family was working 1 month longer a year in 1989 than 20 years ago. We need a national plan, and then we need a commitment to taking care of one another again.
All 5 Democrats sought to prove tonight that they do have an economic plan. And with so much riding on this debate, it seemed that the strategy for almost all of them was not to stumble. Nobody did. Catherine?
Thanks, Deborah. And joining me now, public opinion specialist William Schneider. Bill, as Deborah said, we didn't hear a lot of distinction between the candidates. They agreed more than they disagreed. So what do they do in the next 24 to 48 hours to make that distinction and either hold the line or to improve their positions before 7 o'clock Tuesday night?
I think all the candidates are going to play to their strengths. After all, it's getting awfully late to change their images. That's what we saw happening tonight. All the candidates knew one big thing about this race. There's something the New Hampshire voters and the voters across America want, and that's specificity. They want a plan. They want a candidate who has a blueprint to turn the economy around. Now, the front runners in this race so far, Clinton and Tsongas, I think became front runners because they had the image as candidates who had a blueprint, a plan. They were all waving their books and saying, we have detailed and specific ideas for moving this economy. And what we saw tonight was that Senator Kerry and Senator Harkin and Governor Brown tried to play catch-up. They were trying to say, we can be as specific as they are. They were advertising their blueprints, their 5-point plans, because they knew that's what the voters of New Hampshire are looking for. It's a little late, I think, to change their images. I'm not sure they'll succeed in doing it. The voters want 2 things in this election, specificity, and they're looking for electability. Face it, the Democrats in this country are tired of losing. They want someone who's electable. Now, the big problem with that is they've got 2 front runners who are good on specifics and on substance, Clinton and Tsongas, but there are doubts about their electability. And that's why Kerry and Harkin are trying to argue, as they did in the debate tonight, we're electable. I have an organization, Harkin said, all over the country. And Kerry is saying that you can't question his patriotism. They're trying to advertise themselves as good as the others on specifics, but more electable.
Were you surprised, though, that those 3 didn't attack the electability question with either Tsongas or Clinton?
I think they didn't want to get personal. They decided that there wasn't any real profit in that. They wanted to attack Tsongas and more Tsongas than Clinton because he's the front runner on the issues. So they raised questions about his conservatism on pro-business ideas. They talked about his pro-nuclear positions, and he, I think, defended himself well on those arguments. But they decided not to let this debate get too personal. They all reached the same consensus, and there was a lot of that here. They know where George Bush is vulnerable. George Bush is vulnerable because he doesn't seem to have a vision, a plan, a sense of direction for the future. You know, in any election, if you want to replace the incumbent, you've got to figure out what it is that people aren't getting that they want. In 1976, Jimmy Carter figured that out. It was morality. In 1988, that was because of Watergate. In 1980, rather, Ronald Reagan figured that what people weren't getting from Jimmy Carter was leadership, and he offered leadership. So what they're all trying to offer is a specific plan to turn the economy around, and they're competing to be the one who gains the image of having the best plan.
Absolutely. Bill Schneider, thank you very much. And from Manchester, New Hampshire, I'm Catherine Cryer. Let's go back to